Hello, my name's Caden or Ninjago and today we're going to be taking a look at the 12 Elemental Masters introduced in Ninjago Season 4 and where they are today. Now, the Elemental Masters from Season 4 are probably some of my favourite characters from the show. Even though a lot of them don't really have fully fleshed out personalities, their designs and their powers just make them so cool. Watching Season 4 for the first time as a kid, I think it was, 10 years ago now, I just absolutely fell in love with these Elemental Masters. One master in particular, who I'm sure you all know who I'm talking about. And, of course, with the Tournament of the Sources, which released last year, we got introduced to a ton of new Elemental Masters. We revisited some of our old favourite Elemental Masters, and I just thought it would be really cool to see 10 years on where all of our favourite Elemental Masters are today. So going in chronological order of when the minifigs were released, the first character we have to take a look at is Tox. Now, as I'm sure pretty much everyone is aware, Tox's figure didn't originally come in a Ninjago set. Her figure came in an Ultra Agent set, I think 6 months before the Tournament of Elements sets came out. And so I think because of that reason, because there was no official Tox Ninjago minifig, they decided to bring her back in the Tournament of Sources and give her an official Ninjago minifig. Now, I have done a video last year comparing both minifigs and saying which one I prefer, but I think it is really cool that Tox got a new updated minifig for 2024. I think it does a really good job at modernising her design, and I think it is really cool that even after the merge in Dragon's Rising, Tox is still the Master of Poison. Next up, we have Skylar. Now, Skylar hasn't appeared in Dragon's Rising yet. However, they've made a small reference to her when Kai and Cole talk about going to Chen's noodle house. I assume they're talking about Skylar Chen. And also, this figure, of course, is from the Crystallized Wave. Now, she didn't appear in this suit in the show, so this is a non-canon figure. However, we saw in Crystallized, which wasn't too long before the merge, we saw Skylar did still have her powers, and I don't think there's any reason to assume that she wouldn't still be an Elemental Master. I mean, maybe, maybe not, I have no idea, but I think from the information that we've currently got, I think it is safe to assume that Skylar does still have her powers. The backside of this mask is so weird, by the way. I don't think I've ever spoke about this, but I am not a fan of that face print as well. The war face on Skylar on the crystallized figure is really cool, and just the crystallized figure in general is a really cool figure, so it is a shame how it was never canon, but yeah. As far as we know, it's not like some of the other Elemental Masters where we have no idea and we haven't seen them in a while. Skylar we have seen pretty recently, and we saw she did still have her powers. So unless the merge, because we know the merge does have some kind of connection to elemental powers, unless the merge resulted in Skylar losing her powers, yeah, it is safe to assume she is still an active Elemental Master. The next Elemental Master we have is Caroff, and unfortunately Caroff has not been seen in the show since Season 10, meaning we have no idea what the state of his powers are. Since there's no updated Caroff figure to show, I thought it could be cool to show this AliExpress Chrome Caroff, who seems to have a problem sticking to the base plate. There we go. Yeah, just a really cool chromified Caroff minifig. So Caroff has not been seen or mentioned or referred to in the show since Season 10. So I think it is pretty possible that he could have lost his powers. However, he was a pretty loved Elemental Master, so I really don't think they would, give his powers away off screen. So my guess is that Caroff would still have his powers, but of course, there are some Elemental Masters who we saw in Season 9 who no longer have their powers, so for all we know, Caroff could be one of them. The next Elemental Master we have is, of course, Griffin Turner, and unfortunately, we haven't seen him since Season 9. Griffin Turner was, again, another beloved Elemental Master, I'm pretty sure. Me, personally, I always quite liked him. Of course, we saw him in Season 9. And whilst we haven't seen him since Season 9, we do have an Elemental Master whose power is very similar, and, of course, that is Zer. Now, in my opinion, I think the power of Reflex didn't really need to exist, and I think it would have been pretty cool if instead of the Master of Reflex, if they made Zer the Master of Speed, or even just brought Griffin Turner back. But yeah, I think Speed and Reflex are so similar, instead of making a new elemental power, they could have just given Zer the power of Speed. It would have made for a lot more theories, I think, a lot more headcanons about why Griffin Turner's power You know, kind of like Cinder. No one knows if Cinder is Ash's brother, blah blah blah. But we'll get onto that in a minute. But yeah, I think making Xur the Master of Speed would have been a lot cooler than giving him a completely new power, which is identical to Speed. But either way, I think it would be cool if we saw Griffin Turner again. I think it definitely would fit in with the story and how much Dragon's Rising seems to be focusing on bringing back old concepts and stuff. But maybe that is just me. Of course, another absolutely beloved Elemental Master is Mr. Pale, and as we all know, he got a minifig in 2024 in the tournament Temple City. So knowing that Mr. Pale is still an active Elemental Master is so cool. His updated design is also really cool, but I do think I prefer the old one. It was so cool to see him on screen again. Of course, unfortunately, he was voiced by Kirby Morrow, who did pass away, so his voice was given... I can't remember who voiced him, but his voice was a little bit different, well, quite a lot different actually. However, I still think it was decent. The back print in there is pretty cool, and the updated figure, like I say, is really cool, but I think I do prefer the old one. But yeah, knowing that Griffin Turner is still an active Elemental Master after all these years is so cool in my opinion. I think the new Mr. Pale figure goes really well with the new Tox figure. And if we even get the old Tox figure here, yeah, it's a very cool kind of OG versus modernized collection there. But yeah, no, I really do like Mr. Pale, and I really like that his power was developed in the Tournament of Sources. Of course, he had like a flashbang attack. So yeah, I really like what they did with Mr. Pale, and I love that they decided to bring him back in the Tournament of Sources. Finally, I think this is kind of like the elephant in the room. We have Ash and Cinder. Now, Ash was the first of the OG Elemental Masters whose power we saw return in Dragon's Rising, and it invoked so many theories that I loved theorizing on this too. I think Ash and Cinder is such a cool concept. It's you know, we've got season 3 part 2 and we still don't know how Cinder got Ash's powers. I think Doc Wyatt stated online that they are related, so could it be Ash's son maybe? I have no idea, but yeah, no, Cinder is a really awesome character. Ash, I don't know if this is a common fact, but Ash never spoke in the show. We only saw him in Season 4, and he didn't return for Season 9. So he was kind of like the most irrelevant Elemental Master, and his power was really cool as well. So I'm so glad that they utilised it better by bringing the power back and giving it to a much cooler Master. I think Cinder's pretty controversial. I know some people hate him, some people love him. A lot of people say he was a bit of a wasted character, but no, me personally, I think Cinder was great, and yeah, I am very happy. I love the OG Elemental Masters. I really like the OG Elemental Masters, but I think this might be the only case, or the first case at least, where I think Ash losing his powers and them going to Cinder, who became Raz's kind of, you know, number 2. Yeah, I think that was a really cool thing, and I don't think I would have wanted I don't think I would have wanted Ash to return. I think just giving his powers to a completely new person, really cool idea, and huge thumbs up from me. Another Elemental Master who we know passed on their powers is Shade, of course, the Master of Shadow. Now, this is my custom Obscuria, who I am so proud of. I've got a tutorial on my channel showing how to make this custom and the custom Xur and all other custom Elemental Masters you'll see in this video. So if you are interested, go and check that video out. But yeah, so Shade having a daughter, and that daughter, of course, being Obscuria, raises some questions in the timeline of Ninjago. We see Shade in Season 9, and of course, Dragon's Rising Season 2 Part 2, we meet Obscuria, and I don't think the timeline would realistically, you know, Obscuria has the regular sized legs. It's fair to assume that she is at least maybe 16 years old, and 16 years definitely did not pass in that time, which led people to believe that maybe this wasn't Shade's daughter. But in my opinion, their designs were so similar, it was kind of undeniable that Obscuria was Shade's daughter. And also, I think Doc Wyatt later went on to confirm it. So having Obscuria be Shade's daughter does leave a few holes in the timeline, but I think Doc Wyatt later went on to say that elemental powers can be... I think he said they're usually transferred immediately from birth, but they can occasionally take a few years to actually be transferred, which is what happened with Shade. So a little bit of a lazy excuse, but whatever. Yeah, so I think this is really cool. I did really like Shade, don't get me wrong, and Obscuria, it was a shame how we never got to see her speak, we never saw her fight. Would I have liked Shade to return? Yeah, I think I would have, but I think showing him, because he did kind of always sound like a little bit of a, you know, one of the older, more mature Elemental Masters. Some of them do kind of feel quite young, like Griffin Turner and Skylar, but Shade's voice and his design always did kind of remind me, well, not remind me, but it always made me feel like he was kind of maybe older, maybe in his 30s, 40s, so I think it makes perfect sense for him to have a daughter, and although the powers being passed on doesn't really line up properly in the timeline, yeah, I think she is a super cool inclusion to the show, and no, well, I'd say no complaints from me. Obviously, you had all them complaints, but no, I think overall I can overlook the minor plot holes, and I think this is another really awesome decision. Next up, we have Noro, and of course, if you've seen Dragon's Rising Season 2 Part 2, you will know that Noro did return. He had the exact same design as his minifig, and yeah, I've got nothing critical to say. I think it's really cool that he returned. I think it's really cool that he had the exact same design. Maybe it would have been cool if they showed him having aged a little bit. Of course, Tox and Mr. Pale got completely new design. Well, not completely new designs, but their designs kind of got a little bit overhauled for the show, whereas Noro just had the exact same design as he did in Season 9. So that, I guess it's a little bit boring, but me personally, I have no complaints with that at all, because for Tox and Mr. Pale's new designs, they gave us new figs. However, they would have had to give us a new Noro fig if they, well, they wouldn't have had to, but I would have really wanted a new Noro fig if he got a new design. But not giving him a new design, no issues from me. Not having his powers be passed on is really cool. And yeah, I really like Noro, and it was great to see him again. He didn't speak, and he didn't properly use his powers, which was a bit of a shame in the Tournament of the Sources. And we didn't see anyone else using his powers, which I would have loved to see Noct using them maybe. But yeah, either way, I think it was so cool to see him again, even though he got no lines. Yeah, thumbs up from me. Now, this is of course Balobo, the Master of Nature, and he didn't get a figure until 2021, and of course his figure is very, very different to his design in the show, but whatever, I'm not here to complain about that. However, in Dragon's Rising Season 2, we meet, well no, in Season 1 we meet Xantance, but in Season 2 we find out that he is an elemental master of plants. Now, when I first saw this, I thought that him saying he's the master of plants meant that he is the master of nature. I think it's cool to kind of have the powers have sort of different names, because of course Xantance would have had no way of knowing that, you know, what his power was called. He just used it to garden, so it would have made sense that he called it plants, but it would have been cool for us as the viewers to be able to think, oh yeah, that's kind of like, that must be Balobo's power. But unfortunately, Doc Wyatt said that plants and nature are two different powers, which I don't really like that, to be honest. You may have noticed I'm not a big fan of two separate powers pretty much being the same thing, like fire and heat, speed and reflex, and plants and nature. So yeah, I think I would have preferred if either A, this Balobo design appeared in the show. That would have finally made this figure canon, and it would have prevented so many people, well no, it wouldn't have prevented it, because of course 2021 happened and we all cried and complained about this figure being so inaccurate, but it would have kind of justified it, and people could finally stop complaining, as the outfit would now be canon. So that would have been a good inclusion for the show. Or option 2, which I think would have been just as cool, would have been if they didn't say that plants and nature were two different powers, and instead if they just insinuated that Balobo died and Xantance got his powers. So yeah, not too happy with how they handled this, to be honest. I think my favourite outcome for Balobo would have been if he was brought back in the tournament in this design. The other two Elemental Masters who came in that 2021 set, one of my favourite sets of all time, by the way, of course, their designs weren't too dissimilar to their OG designs. However, with Balobo's being such a complete overhaul of his design, a lot of people complained, and me, I wasn't too happy about it. I don't really mind as much now, but it would have been really, really nice if they could have made this this design canon in Dragon's Rising. Of course, I couldn't make a video talking about old versus new Elemental Masters without talking about Jacob. Jacob was my favourite Elemental Master in the show. His design and his voice and his power, I just loved it all. And unfortunately, of course, in Dragon's Rising Season 2 Part 2, we find out that Jacob's powers have been passed on to this green Malopian named Teal'c. Now, yeah, I don't know how I feel about this. On one hand, I would have loved to see Jacob again. You know, Jacob is he was a meme on my Instagram account for the past, like 5 years. And I never expected to ever see him be referenced in the show again. And then to hear about them bringing back the Tournament of Sources, and of course they'd need a ton of Elemental Masters for it. I really got my hopes up, thinking that maybe they would bring Jacob back. But nope, there was I think the first time we see this guy's powers, he just shot like a sound wave into the sky, and as soon as I saw him do that, my heart absolutely sunk. And then I think it may have been like an episode or two later where we hear Roby confirm that he's the Master of Sound. Yeah, I was extremely disappointed, as you can probably imagine. But I think this guy's design is really cool. Not better than Jacob's by any means, but I think it is cool again to see these OG powers be passed on to new masters. I just wish it didn't have to be Jacob who had that fate. I wish it could have been any of the other Elemental Masters. But yeah, no, Jacob's power passing on. All jokes aside, I think it is really cool. I would have loved to see him in the show again. But yeah, Teal'c is the new Master of Sound, and Jacob's fate is unknown. Next up, we have to look at the most irrelevant Elemental Master, that of course being Gravis. And I don't say he's irrelevant out of a mean place, but statistically, when you look at the facts, he just is the most irrelevant. He only had 1 or 2 speaking lines in Season 4, he didn't appear in Season 9, and neither him or his powers were referenced in Dragon's Rising Season 2 Part 2. Now, of course, there were some other characters who didn't appear in Season 9, so they would, of course, be contenders for the most irrelevant. We have them all here, so let's take a look. Jacob didn't appear in Season 9 either, and he didn't appear in Dragon's Rising Season 2 Part 2, but the fact that his powers got passed on, of course, still does kind of give a little bit of not an explanation, but we kind of know a little bit more about Jacob. Now we know that he doesn't have his powers, which is more than we know for Gravis. Balobo, we didn't see him in Season 9, however, he did get mentioned in Season 9, which shows that the show hasn't forgot about him. And yeah, I guess that's what you could say about Jacob. You can say the show hasn't forgot about him, because, of course, they remembered his power. And yeah, like I say, Balobo was mentioned in Season 9 at least. Ash, of course, didn't appear in Season 9, didn't get mentioned in Season 9, but we know that his power was passed on to Cinder, so yeah, that shows he is. And of course, Kai even referenced him in Season 2 Part 1. And the final character who didn't appear in Season 9 is Camille, and she did appear in Season 2 Part 2. Which means that Gravis is just out flat the most irrelevant Elemental Master. And it's a shame, because he's got a really cool design. I have these custom legs on him, which perfectly match the show. His alternate face print is pretty cool, kind of a meditative expression. And yeah, so how would I like them to go about Gravis in the future? Would I like to see him return? To be honest, I don't care about Gravis enough to want to see him return. His power is really similar to Euphrasia's, or at least the way that they use Euphrasia's powers in the show. I feel like Gravis I feel like he wouldn't really have too much to offer. So if they would like to bring in a new Master of Gravity and make them a cool character, then I guess that could be fine. But me personally, I just don't really see any point in bringing back Gravis or his power. And as we mentioned a minute ago, of course, Camille did reappear in Dragon's Rising Season 2 Part 2. She had her new design based on the minifig she got in markets. I think that is so cool, making this figure canon. And it must be something subconscious or whatever, because let's take Jacob, for example, my goat. This Jacob minifig is of course a legacy redesign. The design doesn't perfectly match his appearance in the show, but it's good enough to a point where I think it is really cool, and I'm not, I've never complained about it. I would have liked a completely canon one, of course. However, that is good enough for me. However, this Camille figure, whilst it doesn't match her appearance in season 4, the fact that it is still canon, even 10 years after Camille's first appearance in the show, for them to redesign her, but to match her design with an official minifig, I just love that so much, and that just makes this minifig more desirable to me. Even Gravis, let me just grab Mr. Irrelevant here. The design they use for Gravis's torso is very slightly different to the design he had in the show. And I know they have their reasons for redesigning stuff. Camille's torso was a direct copy of a CMF Sparta warrior, and Gravis's torso, recolored of course, and maybe a few minor tweaks. And Gravis's torso in season 4 was a complete copy of Zane's stone armor suit. So for the minifigs, they redesigned them slightly to make them look a little bit, make them cooler toys, because that's what they are, they're toys. But for them to get this redesigned version of her and then bring this back in the show, I just love that so much, and it makes the figure being canon just makes it so much more desirable to me. Of course, in season 9, it did get mentioned that Camille had turned evil, but I guess she must be fine now. I've given her a custom face. However, to match the season 2 part 2 look, you should really get a face without a mole. But I guess this is a mix of her season 4 design and her Dragon's Rising design. But yeah, super happy that Camille returned. Super happy that her figure is canon, and I'm super happy that we actually got a figure of her, because that completes our Elemental Master collection. And so yeah, that is what happened. And so yeah, that is all of the information we know about the Elemental Masters from Season 12, and so yeah, that is pretty much all of the information we have about the OG Elemental Masters from Season 4 and where they are now. So yeah, I am kind of sorry, this video did sort of just turn out into me ranting and yapping about the Elemental Masters. That's just because I can talk a lot, and I really like the Elemental Masters, and there's so much to talk about. I feel like this could have kind of been like a podcast style, but I really wanted to show some of my customs. I think this chrome Caroff's really cool. So yeah, hopefully, you just have this video on in the background, a bit of background noise hearing about the Elemental Masters. Hopefully you enjoyed. If you did, please like. I don't know how many people this kind of video appeals to, but hopefully you found some enjoyment out of it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you later. Bye!